Well, hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second Chamber Conversation. Chamber Conversations were kind of designed to be the afternoon version of Wake Up Naples. So you didn't have to wake up early in the morning and come see this. This is also our first virtual Wake Up Naples. So welcome again. I'm Michael Dalby. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Naples Chamber. And we're really thrilled to be able to have this opportunity today to talk about a critical issue that not everybody is really up on and knows the impact of, but we are certainly learning this rapidly, as the impact of early childhood education and in our economy and to our workforce and to our future workforce. So we're really grateful for everybody who's taken part in this discussion today. So let me just start by kind of saying this. We always want to thank the people who make these events possible for us. So here we have our series sponsors, and you can see them up there: Sunshine Ace Hardware, NCH, First Foundations Bank, Coleman Hazard, Taylor, Klaus, and Dupay, and Diaz, Naples Airport Authority, and Gulf Coast International Properties. All these businesses help us to be able to put on these events. Along with, we always want to thank our major investors in our organization. They are essentially the underwriters who help us to be able to have the staff and the resources to be able to do the work. So here we have Arthrex and Collier Enterprises as our chairman circle investors. And then a whole list of legacy leaders who are tremendous businesses in our community and who do a great job of supporting our work. Then we also have our benefactors and a growing list of investors. And so again, we appreciate all these businesses and the work that they do to be able to allow us to do the work that we do. It's fun at these events. We get to call out our new members, and so we've got them listed up here on the slide. If you know any of these businesses, or the business owners, the operators, managers, please tell them thank you for being part of the chamber and making that great decision to support our work and support of the economy and support of all the employers. So thank you very much for those new members. Get to know them, use them. And this is the fun part for us, to show these anniversaries. It's pretty amazing to see how long some of these businesses have been year after year after year supporter of the chamber and all our work in all the different areas that we work within, whether it's the chamber, the Partnership for Collier's Future Economy, or the Leadership Collier Foundation. These businesses have been long-term supporters of our operations, and we really appreciate them and love to get to call them out. Each month we do a business of the month, and it's an opportunity to kind of shine the spotlight on one of our employers here in the community. For February, it is PBS Contractors, residential commercial contractors. They do tremendous work here, been long-time supporters of the chamber. Russell Budd and his entire crew have just with great supporters of the chamber and all different facets of our work. PBS Contractors does amazing work across our community, and particularly they have been strong supporters of our not-for-profit community and all the needs across there as well. So just wanted to give them a thank you and a kudos for being recognized as a business of the month. And then we have an event sponsor, and we're really thankful this time to have Champions for Learning as the event sponsor. You know, Champions for Learning is a great community-based nonprofit organization, whole mission about life-changing experiences, learning experiences for their students that they work with, and all the students here. They're essentially our foundation for education. I love that vision for the community: 100% engaged in support of student success. Champions for Learning serves as a unique role in bringing the community together to support a culture of learning and innovation, and has since its founding since 1990. And so I thought it was kind of cool. I'm going to get to introduce Susan McManus, who's the president of Champions for Learning. And I was looking at this quick little bio piece that I came up with, and said she has been with the foundation since its beginnings. So first she was on the board of directors and then became the executive director in 1993. And I can tell you personally, working with Susan has been a great honor for me. She is so incredibly knowledgeable about all the different facets of education. She and her staff are tremendous. And they also, Champions for Learning is also the backbone organization for Future Ready Collier, our collective impact effort on education here in our community. So it is a great honor to be able to introduce Susan and have her talk a little bit about Champions for Learning. Susan?
Thank you, Michael. And we feel the very same way about our long-term relationship with the Chamber. And Champions for Learning we were founded with that support of our business community and wanting to have the very best schools. And we know that together we've accomplished that. We're just so proud. We have three key areas of work with our educators, our students, and our community. And I think through that role we play as a backbone organization, we've learned so much about early learning, even though our programs aren't directly focused in that area. They're more K-12. We know how incredibly important it's been to work together with all of our early learning partners, our healthcare partners, to help families be ready to go to school and those children to be ready. I know as an employer how challenging it's been over the last few years and how important it is to all of us that our staff can come to work knowing that their children are safe and they're healthy and well. And I think that as businesses, not-for-profit businesses, as parents, together we are we know how incredibly important the conversation will be today. And Future Ready Collier, the backbone role that we play, bringing everyone together, it's just such a very special honor that Champions for Learning has to lead in this way. I know that I'm excited to hear from Vance again today and all our statewide partners that have been working with us in Collier County as well for many years. So thank you. It's just an absolute honor, pleasure to help sponsor this today, and to all our partners out there. I really look forward to being able to work together and value what we're doing today for our businesses and our parents and families. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Susan.
So much, Susan. Thank you for sponsoring and supporting today's chamber conversation. My name is Alex Bro. I am the Director of Talent Initiatives at the Greater Naples Chamber. And through my work, we help employers address challenges they are facing with their workforce by connecting and finding resources to support our business community. Back in July, we hosted a roundtable discussion with 12 large employers in Southwest Florida. We discussed how childcare has impacted their employees and the challenges their staff faces with finding quality and affordable childcare. After this discussion, we better understood how childcare is a direct impact to our workforce and for our employers to grow their companies. Childcare is one of the barriers for employers to recruit and retain employees, and the lack of childcare creates stress on employees, which results in the employee not being as productive as they could be, or missing work more than they or you would like, especially for women, since childcare responsibilities have traditionally fallen onto the women. And there are statistics available from the RERI at FGCU that there have been a significant decrease in women in the labor force. Shortly after our roundtable discussion, our board of the Greater Naples Chamber approved to add childcare to our legislative agenda. Our staff have been speaking and learning and advocating on behalf of these centers and for employees to hopefully bring awareness to this crisis. Did you know that there have been 15 centers that have closed in Collier County since the beginning of the pandemic? That is over 700 seats lost. I hope today we all have a better understanding that early learning is a talent availability issue, which is a business issue and will continue to be an issue for generations to come if we don't do something about it. So just a reminder throughout this webinar, please ask your questions and make comments in our chat box. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll also have a Q&A at the end where we'll be asking the panelists your questions. And next, I would like to introduce Representative Vance Lupo. He was unable to be with us today, but he sent a short video.
Hey everyone, it's Vance Lupo. So sorry I can't be with you today. I know it's virtual, love to be in Naples in person, but I can't even be with you live virtually because I'm actually in committee right now. But I did want to take an opportunity to thank the Greater Naples Chamber for their continued focus on early childhood education. I honestly can't think of another local chamber that has been as dedicated to this issue as your chamber has been. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. For those of you who understand this issue and know how important it is, this message is not for you. This is really a message for people and business leaders who really don't understand how the conversation around childcare is going to ultimately impact their long-term bottom line. And if you've ever spent any time with me, you'll know that I talk a lot about how childcare is really about the workforce of tomorrow, that the foundation that we set with our youngest learners is really indicative of the competitiveness we're going to have as a state 15, 18, 20 years from now. But what the pandemic has shown us is that, childcare is not only about the workforce of tomorrow, it's about the workforce of today. For all of your employees who are doing their best to keep the lights on, childcare is a necessity. And what we've seen over the last 2 years, primarily because of the pandemic, is the challenges that our early learning centers have faced just trying to keep their doors open. Obviously, we've seen the issue of labor shortages, not only in the childcare industry, but across all other industries. But understand the implications for your industry as it relates to childcare. Our early learning teachers are making $11, $12 an hour. And what we're seeing now is that a lot of childcare workers are finding it really more beneficial to go work at a local fast food restaurant or a big box store because they'll make $16, $17 an hour. And what that means for the childcare center is that center cannot serve as many children, right? So a teacher in a pre-K classroom in Florida can serve 18 students. If a childcare center loses that teacher, that's 18 children that childcare center can't serve. That's 18 sets of parents that are struggling to find childcare, that in that moment. So, understanding the importance of making sure that the childcare industry is healthy, that we come out of this pandemic with real momentum, I think is critical to every other industry. And I know from a statewide perspective, working with the Florida Chamber of Commerce, they get this. They understand that we as a state really need to look at professionalizing our industry and making sure that we are investing wisely and effectively in high quality childcare across the state, because it's not just about establishing that foundation long term for children. That's the central piece of it. But it's making sure that our society can go back to work. And if parents don't have a place for their child to be during the day, to be safe and to be nurtured and to learn, it makes it really, really difficult for other industries to come back. Obviously, I'm in Tallahassee right now. Hopefully it's warmer in Naples than it is in Tallahassee, but a lot of things are moving through the legislative process. Last year, we passed what I believe are two of the most significant early childhood bills in the 10 plus years that I've been involved in this space, but probably really since the passage of the School Readiness Act of 1999. Representative Grawl passed HB 419. I was her co-prime sponsor, her prime co-sponsor, that really looked at professionalizing the industry, placing accountability into the system to make sure that the state is investing dollars in high quality childcare. It's not just about warehousing children, which unfortunately is a reality in too many communities. It's about making sure that children are going to centers that are having real outcomes. The 419 also created a division of early learning, named a chancellor. So, what we saw from last year to this year is the full professionalization of early childhood and seeing it in the same vein as our K-12 system, as our higher ed system, as our state college system. So hugely transformational policy. I carried HB 7011, which was probably the most significant focus on literacy that our state has ever taken, identifying struggling readers as quickly as possible and making sure that the necessary resources are injected as quickly as we can to make sure that those children are brought back up to grade level. And because we focused so much on quality last year and really looking at the structure around early learning, the big conversations we're seeing this year are around funding for early learning. Looking at the BSA for VPK. Representative Grawl, again, sort of, my best friend in this process on early learning issues, she's brought back HB 1199, which is a focus on school readiness funding and how are we actually funding these programs, making sure that you have an equitable distribution of dollars across the state, because there's very real concern that some communities are not receiving the dollars they need, primarily because of the algorithm that we've used and the formula that we've used for school readiness funding. So, our goal from the very beginning, and I said this in committee the other day, that there's always been this conversation in early learning about do we focus on quality or do we focus on funding? And it's really kind of a chicken or the egg situation, and they're interconnected. But we as a state, and I think wisely so, we focused first on quality, making sure that the structure and the accountability systems are in place to ensure that we have a high quality system. And now the goal is to make sure that it's appropriately funded. You do not as a state want to fund low quality care. That does not provide a service to any child. So building off of the success we had last year with HB 419, HB 7011, and really the overwhelming support we had for early learning, our focus this year is on trying to tackle some of those funding issues that have plagued our system for a long time. But my ask of you today is to really think about how these policies, which may not off the top of your head really resonate with what your bottom line is this year or next year, but understand, as I said, your support for early learning will dictate the workforce that we have in 2030, 2035, and 2040. So be proactive. But then secondly, also understand that there's a necessity now, and there's a reality that we're experiencing across the state where parents are not able to find accessible childcare just because of the nature of the pandemic. So we're working as hard as we can. There's a considerable amount of federal money that's been brought into this state that we're using to try and get a lot of these childcare centers back on their feet. But there's definitely a role that you can play as business leaders in terms of supporting your employees, supporting policies that focus on early learning, and really getting even more engaged with your local early learning coalition. Future Ready Collier, I know that's a major initiative. And again, I'll just finish by saying thank you again to the Greater Naples Chamber. It is, for someone who's been in this space for 10 years, who has waited and waited and waited for the business community to come to the table, it is hugely heartening to know that one of our most significant local chambers is taking this issue up, prioritizing it, and understands that we as a state cannot have the bright future that we all want without investing significantly and wisely in our youngest children. So hope you have a great webinar. Hope to see some of you in Tallahassee soon, and when we have an in-person event again, get it on my calendar and I'll be there. All the best.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Representative Lupus, for sending those remarks. What great points he makes, especially that children are attending high quality centers with real outcomes is so important, especially as many of us on this call know that only 50% of our students in Collier County are considered to be kindergarten ready. So if we raise the percentage by offering more quality centers, the more students are ready to learn on their first day of kindergarten. And today we're so fortunate to have 3 of our quality centers participating in today's panel. And also today, Susan Block, the CEO of Early Learning Coalition of Southwest Florida, was not able to attend, but she sends her regards. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to Dawn, Heather, and Jessica, who lead the 3 early learning centers in Collier County. And panelists, if you'd like to turn on your cameras now, that'd be great. To give you a better understanding of when Representative Lupus talks about quality childcare, some of the markers of high quality care are symbolized in terms that are recognized here in Florida and nationally. They are accreditation, gold seal, and participation in a voluntary quality rating and improvement system in collaboration with the Early Learning Coalition of Southwest Florida. Not only do these 3 programs carry accreditation, they are all nationally accredited. They participate in quality rating and improvement system run by the Early Learning Coalition, which is a voluntary program aspiring to demonstrate the best practices of early learning through 4 and 5 stars earned. Collectively, these 3 programs, they currently serve 656 children, and there are 441 children that have families that are on these wait lists at these centers. Hoping to get a call that a space is available soon. So these are some of the heroes of the pandemic. Childcare is not often included when we talk about essential workers. However, without childcare, parents would not have been working throughout this pandemic. So thank you to all 3 to agree to sit on this panel and give you a local perspective. And thank you, Representative Lupus, and the hardworking members of the Florida Legislature for their commitment to improving the quality of care for children. So panelists, thank you so much for joining us. We have Heather and Jessica and Dawn. And my first question, I'll pass this off to John or to Dawn. Sorry. Why is early learning important for our future workforce?
Well, I think Representative Lupus highlighted so many great points in his remarks about how important it is to have quality programs and the need for it. And if you listened, it was very interesting for me to see how he used the word childcare and then went into early learning. So for many people, it was the beginning of childcare. Some people thought it was just babysitting and that we needed it for moms and dads to go to work. But now when we look at the need for students being kindergarten ready and to be successful in their academic career, that childcare became an early learning program that builds that foundation so that children are ready for kindergarten. And there's tons of results that you show if they're behind in kindergarten and they're not learning to read so they can read to learn by third grade, they are behind. And so then your workforce that's graduating high school in 20 years don't have that academic foundation to be successful and get the higher paying jobs or have the skill set that workers are looking for. So it's really important that we start when the brain is in that development stage as early as 6 weeks. Yes, we have a curriculum for 6-week-olds all the way up until 5 years old, so that they're meeting all those milestones that they need to be successful. And for families that we serve, where English is a second language, they're already the children are exposed to 30 million words less than a child that is in an English-speaking family household. So to be able to provide that support, so they're exposed to more vocabulary, have access to books, have all those things at an early age so that they are kindergarten ready. And as you said, 50% of the community already is not kindergarten ready and are behind. And that is forcing the education system to implement more programs to get those children up to level by third grade. So if we can get them earlier and build that foundation, but also to build that social, emotional foundation that they need to be successful in school. We start with that with the 6-year-olds too. Or the 6-week-olds all the way to the 5-year-olds.
Thank you so much. And Jessica, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, that's really well said, Dawn. I would just like to add that during the first 3 years of life, the brain grows 80% of its adult size. That's just tremendous. So quality early learning centers, we provide a safe environment with a high adult to child ratio. And we use developmentally appropriate curriculum for our children. And in turn, that has a big impact on their emotional development, their learning abilities, and how they'll do in school and later in life. There's a lot of research about children that enter kindergarten behind. They stay behind throughout their educational careers and even beyond. So that definitely has an impact on the workforce. So we do have to invest in early childhood and lay that foundation for school readiness.
Thank you, Jessica. And Heather, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Thank you, ladies. And I agree, very well said. I think in general, we know that there are 1.3 million children. Can you hear me, Alex?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. There are 1.3 million children under the age of 6 in the state of Florida. And as Jessica mentioned, we know that by age 5, 90% of those children have experienced optimal brain development. So that is a lot of learning that occurs between the age of infancy and age 5. We know that we are building tomorrow's workforce while we are supporting today's workforce, caring for these children. We also know that children that have access to high quality early learning are more likely to go to post-secondary education, more likely to be involved in their communities, and more likely to own a home and avoid incarceration. All of these are great reasons for the local workforce to support early learning education.
Great. Thank you. All great points. So thank you all so much. So my next question, early learning centers, they are businesses too. So what kind of challenges are you guys facing currently? And Heather, I'll kick it back to you for this one.
Sure. So currently our biggest challenge is our teacher shortage. We have seen a teacher shortage like I personally, being in this field for over 20 years, have never dealt with. Our teachers are frontline workers. They're dealing primarily with children that have never been vaccinated. We've had more staff illnesses as well as children illnesses, which do have an effect on our bottom line because we either might not charge a parent tuition if we have to close a classroom, or obviously if we close a classroom, that also has an effect on our bottom line because we're not incurring that tuition. Also, our programs are required to have trained staff. I think it's important to understand when we speak to the general public that not anybody can come and work in a school readiness licensed facility. Our teachers are required to have a certain amount of training and pass tests for that training within 90 days of starting a job. In addition to that, our programs are typically open 10.5 hours a day. So our staffing levels for one classroom sometimes involve 3 to 4 staff. In addition to that, from speaking on behalf of my centers, our income to expense ratio is very minimal. It costs us approximately $10,600 yearly to care for one child and provide education to them above and beyond what we receive for government subsidy or private tuition. So we then in turn have to make up those funds to care for these children. Thank you, Alex.
And Dawn, what about you? What are the challenges that you're facing as an early learning center?
Well, I think Heather hit on the biggest one for all of us. It is, employment and, having that quality teachers in the classroom. Prior to COVID, we had the challenge that it's the competitive wage problem that Representative mentioned in his speech, where you can make more money at a fast food restaurant. But also, with the pandemic, it has caused the extra stress and the mental health issues that have tied into it with, being vaccinated, not being vaccinated, being sick. So it's been a hard time. So I think right now is just really focusing on the workforce and workforce development for this industry needs to be a priority. How do we can motivate people to come into this career? Like Heather said, it's a training, it's a calling. That we can motivate them to come in here, make sure they can get fair wages, that they have the resources that they need to make that impact on that child. So we are creating a next generation of workforce that are going to school qualified and ready. But if you don't have that quality teacher, you can't have that quality program. So it is, I think, a movement right now. COVID may have pushed it a little bit further. And quicker than we expected, but we really need to focus on that quality and support for the teachers to make sure we all have that workforce that want to be here and that want to be making the difference in children's lives. And it's going to cost us, a new pay scale that allow us to do that. And that's going to be our biggest challenge as nonprofits also.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Jessica, what challenges are you facing?
As Heather and Dawn shared, we are experiencing staff shortages and high staff turnover, and we're losing our quality employees because we just can't compete with the other industries. When you go to a restaurant that's short staffed, you just wait a little bit longer for food. But if you are at a child care center and it's short staffed, we have to close classrooms. So that's very challenging, and it really impacts parents and the workforce. We had a father show up last week that told us his 4-year-old son has been through 2 center closures this year. And just this morning, we had another dad come in with his daughter, and he said, I'm not just calling and going, I'm just going into every center that I can to get on their wait list. I'm desperate for childcare. So unfortunately, most quality childcare centers are full and they don't have openings. So, I agree that we need to raise the wages for childcare workers so that we can compete with the other industries, which in turn will expand the supply so that we can serve more children and families.
Right. And I kind of want to go off of that too. You're also talking about raising wages. What other ways are you as centers trying to attract and retain your current staff besides just raising your wages?
Well, I can start with that. We have implemented training, paid training for our staff. We're working with a couple of universities to create programs so we can better train our students, our teachers, and providing that to them so they don't have to pay for it, working with them with teach scholarships so they can get their degrees. As their degrees increase, they can get higher pay. I see there's a question here from Althea. We do have an incentive for our staff. They do, if they have children in the program, they receive a 50% discount on that of what they would qualify for on a sliding scale. So we try to make sure that they get the resources and they're part of our families too, of getting what we would provide our students' families.
Thank you.
Alex, if I can add to that, we've also really tried to poll our current teaching staff to see what it is they value. What can we do better? What is within our control to make their lives easier? And we're really trying to take that information. It's a hard job to be an early childhood education teacher, and those that shine at it and that are really committed to it as an industry, I think all of us are looking at what can we do to help them? And those are the things we're really trying to take into consideration as we move forward.
Thank you. And Jessica, do you have anything to add to that? Okay, great. So our next question, I talked about this earlier, and so did Vance Lupo. But if you can extend a little bit more on, or expand a little bit more on, why is early learning important to employers, and what is the impact on their current workforce? So if you can talk a little bit about that, would really help. And I'll start off with Jessica.
As Vance shared, economic development really does start with early childhood development. And the best investment we can make is that children have access to high quality learning. The children that we are educating today are the ones that are doing the work in our community in the future, and they deserve it. They deserve affordable and quality education. Studies show that when children and families have stable, high quality childcare, it helps parents to improve how they do in the labor and the workforce. And if they have access to quality and affordable childcare, they can go to work. So if childcare is too costly, parents can't really afford to work. And if childcare is not quality, some parents would prefer to stay home with their child and offer that quality to them the best that they know how. Like the father that came into Fun Time today, having limited access to early learning, it causes parents to miss work, and that potentially could lead to job loss. So if we can support families with the cost of quality childcare, it will result in a more efficient and productive workforce, both now and in the future.
Thank you. And Heather or Dawn, you want to step in and add anything?
I just think we really need to, it's worth saying again, that we are truly supporting the workforce of today, while we are laying the groundwork for the workforce of tomorrow. We know that right now, due to the pandemic, so many children are struggling with social and emotional issues. And it's vital that those children have access to early interaction and support in order to be successful in kindergarten. And we know what happens from research: if children are not successful in kindergarten, they start behind. And then we have to catch them up by third grade, or the research indicates they remain behind and they struggle academically. All of this starts with access to early learning and being able to fund and provide slots for children to attend programs like ours.
Thank you.
I think the only thing I would add to what Jessica and Heather said was that, you know, when there are bumps in the workforce or something going on in the community, because the children are in our programs, we're able to support the families. And I think that's important, that we're able to provide consistency. So if someone does lose their job, or as we saw with the pandemic, people being out of work for several months, we can help address those barriers that are coming up, and not let the education be interrupted during that time. So coming as a part of a community has been very important, and it gives parents another resource when there's other issues that may be happening at home, as Heather said, the mental health issues or other workforce issues that may come up. So I think it's important to be there for the families and as a community member.
So important. And as a parent myself, I know how helpful it has been to have a reliable place for my children to go to school while I'm at work. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing. So I have another question about, so how has COVID changed early learning? How has it changed as a business and as a early learning center?
Well, I think COVID has changed all our lives, and it's, you know, in every business. There might be some good that's come out of it. Zoom has been good for people communicating more. But for the early learning centers and for us, once again, it has allowed us to step back and really look at what are the needs of the families and the children and the teachers. Making decisions on what is best for the student has been our motto since day one of COVID. It's been, you know, student focused, mission forward. I joke that I don't want to make any more than 5 decisions in a meeting because, you're constantly asked to, important questions in the past 2 years. Are we going to be open? Are we going to pay our teachers? Are we going to let parents in the building? So there's so much that has changed, and those decisions are, everyone's going to have a different reaction to it. So what we took for granted early on, like parents being able to drop their kids off in the classroom and meet with the teachers, that's the highlight of a parent's day, is to hear the teachers say that the student had a wonderful day and what they did. But right now, with parents not being able to go into the building, they're losing that opportunity that connection. So now we have to have an app that allows the teacher to text the parents with that information. So, you have to adapt and pivot a lot, and that we've done that. But the one thing that we've learned is the students are resilient. They'll wear their masks. They'll continue to play and to learn. But we have to keep it going. So the biggest challenge has just been making the right decisions. And I think also just making sure we're staying student focused that whole time and mission forward.
Thank you. Heather, I see you go on mute.
I was going to say, I think our biggest challenge has been the continuity of care, because consistent care is vitally important in early childhood education. These children need to come to school and have the same routine and have the same support staff. And that is really difficult when you have a record number of illnesses, both for children and for teachers, as well as some of the staffing turnover issues that we've had. So I think just really focusing on, like Dawn said, what is in the best interest of our children, what is our mission, and what can we do to support the teachers that are really driving our frontline mission. And I think one of the biggest challenges for me personally as administrator is it's really tested my flexibility skills, because as Dawn mentioned, we put out fires all day long. It's not uncommon for me to answer my phone when one of my directors calls and say, tell me something good before you tell me what you called me for, because we really have to make that a focus to find the positive, because we really are dealing with a lot of challenging situations right now, and focusing on the positive and being ever so mindful of the difference that we're making in these children's lives.
Great.
And I would just add that, absences do affect learning, and we've had a lot of absences, not just with staff, but with also students. We also continue to struggle with parent engagement. It's much more difficult during COVID. And we know that partnering with parents really does help children in the long run. So Alex shared the statistics about how many centers have closed. So, there were long-term issues with recruiting and retaining staff before the pandemic, especially the quality staff. And now this is just exacerbated by the pandemic. So it does continue to compromise the access and quality for our families. And that will have lasting implications in the long term for our community.
Thank you. And so we have a couple more minutes, and we do have a lot of questions. So one question I want to start off with is, what is one of the misconceptions about early learning?
I can address that. And I know that Dawn touched on that a little bit as well. I think that some people think that early learning centers just watch their children and keep them safe during the day, but we do so much more than that. We're able to do early identification that children might be having with hearing and vision, dental, learning as well. So there's so much more that early learning centers do, especially the quality early learning centers.
Thank you. Heather, did you have something to add? I saw your go on mute.
I was going to basically say the same thing that Jessica said. I don't think, unless you've ever walked into a classroom and maintained classroom management and provided social emotional supports, while also making sure you're meeting the state dimensions for learning in different cognitive and social emotional and math areas, that you can truly value and appreciate what an early childhood teacher does every day.
Right. Thank you. And so we have another question. What would be most helpful for business leaders to do to address your challenges and to support you?
Alex, I'll take that. That's right with you.
Sure.
I think the first part of this is to have a conversation. Do they know the struggles that their employees are having finding early childhood education? Is there a center that's nearby them that they could help support? And by support, I don't mean just financially. Could they get involved? Could they volunteer? Could they get involved with the Early Learning Coalition and seek to support on a board level or a volunteer role in a way that would help early learning? I think knowledge is power, and there's a lot that businesses do not know about the effects of early learning on the community.
If I could add to that too, I think that if there's any businesses that are in a situation to partner with a quality early learning center so that we can expand services for children, I think a discussion about that and how we can support one another so that we can continue to have parents in the workforce and continue to offer quality programming for children to get them ready for kindergarten. I think we need to start having some of those conversations as well.
And Dawn, you want to add anything to that? How can a business leader support you?
I think what Jessica was saying with also support with resources for the families too. It's not just, it's not just the early learning center itself, but the population that we serve. So having additional resources that we can share with the families is very important. So it may not seem like a fit for some businesses, but there is so many things that we need to keep the family strong and keep that continuity that we would, they should have that conversation that Heather was saying, that where can they help and keep that conversation going. So,
thank you. And we have another question about what are the barriers to expand existing centers or open new ones?
Well, since I am in the process of expanding and waiting to open a new one, our biggest barrier is supply chain right now, because we were supposed to have our grand opening for a new campus beginning of March, and now it's moved back to the end of April. But we 5 years ago, the Guadalupe Center set on a mission to expand and address our long wait list. We had a wait list of nearly 500 children under the age of 5, and we've added we opened up a campus in August of 2020 to serve 64 more children under the age of 3, and we're opening our 4th campus in April, hopefully, in April for another 154 children under the age of 5. And the expansion took us a long time to get here, and we're very excited about it. But now with all the issues we just talked about, the sustainability is really going to be the next challenge of quality teachers, quality staff, funding to make sure that we can continue to provide that quality. So our next 5-year plan is focused just on quality, and that is starting with teachers and staff and what does that look like, and the salary scales that come into that with the minimum wage going up. So the biggest challenge is really that sustainability factor. We'll have the seats now, but will we have the funding, and what are the changes of the funding that's coming down from the state that will affect that? So that's we're excited to get more children into the seats, but we have to make sure that the quality is there and that we have that workforce that is going to make the biggest difference on their lives.
It's incredible what the Guadalupe Center has done in Immokalee for the children and families in the community. It's I just am always so grateful that we have the Guadalupe Center serving those Immokalee families. I think oftentimes people think that Naples is wealthy, and you look around and think, oh, there's not poverty here, but there's a lot of poverty in Naples. There's a lot of children on our wait list that also need to have access to quality education. But we also know that it's very expensive to try to obtain property. And so I think that if we can discuss just creative ways to work together to try to serve more children and just to have a vision together so that we can serve our children so that they're prepared. I just think that that's definitely a way that we can work together.
Great.
I agree. I think collaboration is very beneficial. And if there's businesses out there, such as churches that maybe don't use all of their classroom space during the week, that's a great opportunity for an early learning center. And multi-space buildings are beneficial because, as I mentioned, we work with very small profit margins. And oftentimes a leasing option is much more feasible for an early learning center than purchasing or building a brand new building.
Thank you. And because we all think, oh, we'll just open up more centers and then we'll have more seats available for everybody, but that's just not the case. So thank you so much for bringing your insight onto that. We also have another question. Let's see, there was one in the chat box. Are there grants or other programs available to start up ELCS?
There are grants to support early learning centers. I'm sure there are some at different times to start up centers. Oftentimes they are attributed to specific zip codes and specific factors, funding factors for specific grants. So there's a lot of parameters. It's not necessarily generalized funding.
Thank you. And we had another question about what can local elected officials do to address this problem?
I'm afraid to answer that one.
I was waiting to see who's going to start answering it.
I'm probably not the best person to answer that one. I think it all goes back to, when we start early, it's just really understanding what early learning is about. I mean, it's not babysitting. If somebody says babysitting or it's childcare, they're not realizing what we're doing in that foundation we're creating. And I think for elected officials to truly understand that and I think and be able to be that advocate for us. And when there are bills going, in front of them, or there's funding opportunities that could come down to the community, that they really understand the need to get it to us and not hold it back. And I think that's important, is really understanding the impact that this has on the community, not just the businesses, the children, the families, the nonprofits, but everyone. And I just don't know if every elected official understands that.
And I would encourage them to consider joining Future Ready Collier and visiting centers and learning as much as they can so that they can make informed decisions that's going to impact our community. Because when you visit a quality center and you see that there's schedules that are followed, you see that we're really working hard on parent involvement, and we have a quality curriculum, and we're monitoring children's growth and development. When you see that happening right before you, it really does paint a picture that you can understand why it's so important.
Thank you. And we have another question about, so since the 15 centers have closed, is there any way to reach out to those staff who have lost their jobs to fulfill the staffing needs of the centers that remained open? I know, Heather, when Precious Cargo unfortunately closed, you all were there to do interviews with their staff members. But if you can talk a little bit more about that.
I would love to. So we have placed a significant amount of time and effort towards recruiting teachers from prior centers that have closed. Unfortunately, some of these teachers have decided to leave the teaching field. It's been very challenging for them to endure, it's an emotional job teaching. And I think when you close a classroom, and I think it almost takes a piece of their heart, not to speak metaphorically, but it's really difficult. And we have been successful in retaining some of those teachers. We will keep trying. And if teachers who have left hear this and are interested in coming back into the field, all of us are certainly here to support them. But I think right now it's just really challenging. There's more virtual jobs available for people, and there's a lot more jobs available at a much higher pay rate that don't require the level of responsibility and accountability of being in a classroom with 15 to 20 children.
Mm-hmm. It's very true. Okay, and I see we were talking about Future Ready Collier in the chat box. Shout out to Future Ready Collier. I know all of us on this call are part of Future Ready Collier in some capacity. We've really benefited as a chamber being involved with Future Ready Collier. So if you're a business or if you're just somebody who is more interested in this topic, please feel free to reach out to Future Ready Collier or myself, and I can help connect you. Okay, so that concludes our time with our panelists, but we would love for you all to stay on, keep asking your questions, making comments in the chat box, and we'll have time at the end to also open it up for questions again. So thank you, ladies. And then at this time, I will switch back to my screen and share my screen. All right, so I'll move on to, I'll introduce Madeline Thacker, from the Children's Movement of Florida. She firmly believes in promoting a strong start for all children in ensuring robust supports for families with young children. She oversees all of the movement's outreach and communication efforts, including the Business Engagement Initiative, Bosses for Babies, and leads state-level policy efforts aimed at increasing investment in high-quality early learning, healthcare for children, and parent support. And so I will pass it off to Madeline. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. My pleasure, Alex. So I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk to you about Bosses for Babies. This is something that overlaps with everything we've talked about today, about the need to support our youngest children and families. So those of you who know the Children's Movement of Florida, we are the state's leading voice on early childhood, mainly focused on championing policies and investments that touch early learning, healthcare access, and parent support. Bosses for Babies is a network of business leaders who champion family-focused practices in their communities, focusing on company culture and leading by example. Now, I bet that many of you on the line today, employers who understand early learning, your investments, your time, you're bought in on this primarily because you understand the workforce of tomorrow issue. So many companies have focused on education in their corporate social responsibility for a long time, and we know now that early learning is included in that. At Bosses for Babies, our ethos is that this not only supports the workforce of tomorrow in that way, but of course the workforce of today. And the pandemic has only made this conversation more prominent, that the workforce is increasingly demanding flexibility, purpose, impact from their lives and from their jobs. And so anything that business leaders can do to support employees that have families, it is a direct impact on the bottom line. So a couple of statistics to give you an idea of this. It's expected that turnover costs employers about 20% of an employee's salary. So employers that offer flexibility and family-friendly arrangements for employers overwhelmingly report higher employee satisfaction. One study from Utah put that at 94%. So saving money on turnover, leading to employees that are happier, this is a win-win. The other thing that's important is it's projected that millennials are going to make up about 75% of the workforce by 2025. And we know that 70 to 80% of millennials say they want to change jobs for one with more family-friendly benefits. They're proud to work for companies that promote work-life balance and flexibility. And the other things that employees are valuing, the movement did a survey of working parents in December 2020. Things that came to the top there were paid time off, flexibility, insurance, and childcare stipends. And then we know on the other side that when employees can be family friendly, it really contributes to community prosperity. It contributes to rising kindergarten readiness rates. When you consider that 70% of young children in Florida live in families where all adults work, we know that this is something that we need to take into account. So what are Bosses for Babies and what does it take to be a boss for babies? This initiative is about meeting business leaders where they are so that no matter the size, the available resources, or the company's needs, they're able to affect meaningful change. So we do this through three main pillars that can be individually tailored. businesses can support their employees. They can advocate or they can give back. Now, supporting employees, I think of what Heather said about asking their workforce, what do you need? I think this starts with having conversations internally to understand employee needs and goes all the way up to changing policies in the employee manual, where you've got subsidies for health insurance, you've got paid time off, and a gold standard of parental leave. And so when we work with companies, we help them to communicate with employees, to work on those surveys, and then to communicate about the changes that they are making. One example, and a real shout out again to Michael and Alex in the chamber for having this conversation. Michael Dalby is one of our bosses for babies, and this is a leader who understands the impact that supporting working families can have on his own workforce, and also looks for ways to open these conversations in the community. But, there are often a business thinks, well, I can't offer any more paid leave, it just doesn't fit with the bottom line. That's where I think it's important to think about a whole range of family focused practices that you can take on. And it might even start with things like scheduling. For those that have an hourly workforce, scheduling in advance so that employees can find the childcare that they need. It doesn't cost anything and makes a big difference to the family. For those who are in the business world, in meetings all the time, scheduling meetings around pickup and drop off time so that employees can have some flexibility to work a little bit later, but take a break in the middle of the day if they need to pick up a child. There so much can be done just with flexibility. So all of that falls under what we call support. Then advocate is the second way for Bosses for Babies to get involved. Our business leaders can engage local officials, community leaders, state legislators, their own board members, and their peers in dialogue about the importance of the early years and why programs and investments in young children are so important for the workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow. An example, again, right with the Naples Chamber, is opening this conversation today is one way that as a boss for babies, you can make an impact. And for any of you businesses listening, anything that you heard today that resonated, when you share that, you are being an advocate for families, working families with young children. The idea that early learning is not babysitting, that this is a way to support the bottom line for your company and community prosperity. These are all messages that you can take and share. And so we are offering our Bosses for Babies on a regular basis an opportunity to share their stories and highlight through webinars, events, and other public forums. Often when you hear the word advocate, you think about the legislature and what we can change. And of course, that's one part of it. If you know your county commissioner or your state legislator and want to just call them and tell them this is an issue that's really important and you want them to take a look. I think, as Dawn said earlier, when funding decisions are being made, when federal funds are coming down to be used in the community, is your mayor thinking about using a portion of their funds for this? And when the state legislature is looking at increasing funding for school readiness or subsidized childcare program or VPK or voluntary pre-K, have they heard from folks in the local community who say, yes, this should be a priority, and are they ready to support that? So there's so many different ways to be an advocate, starting with just spreading the conversation and going on toward more of what you think about with traditional advocacy. And the last thing that we ask bosses to consider is to give back. Our program helps businesses identify opportunities that can impact their community on a larger scale, adopting an early learning center in their neighborhood, sponsoring a community event that promotes early literacy, children's health, or in some way supports parents of young children. I think as Jessica said earlier, finding ways to partner with early learning centers. Susan Block and the Early Learning Coalition have been great partners of ours in this, and we work with their colleagues throughout the state to be able to connect businesses with the right centers to make an impact. And also encouraging volunteer opportunities that impact the early childhood community, whether it's time or treasure. Again, thinking about early learning when you care about education, when you care about community prosperity, understanding that this is such an important way to give back. So our Bosses for Babies, so far we've engaged 32 CEOs from across Florida that together employ about 20,000 Floridians. That's across 17 cities and 15 counties. And we would love to grow this initiative to the point where in each county, we've got major employers and small employers who have embraced this vision and understand all that we can do to set up the best success for all of our children. So again, with a thank you to Alex and Michael, I think I will leave it there for right now and answer any questions that you may have.
Great, Madeline.
Thank you so much, Madeline. Yes. So before you leave, Madeline, I do have one question for you. And since you have a statewide perspective of early learning, is there one place in Florida or across the nation where you would say that they're doing it right? They know, they understand as a community of how to move the needle on early learning?
I have to say, I think Florida is doing a lot right. We have, as Vance said in his video, we have a state chamber that gets this. We have your chamber that gets this, and so many others. I also think, those who follow early learning might have seen the news recently about Tennessee's pre-K program and some questions raised about that. The Wall Street Journal had an editorial about this. And, I haven't dug deeply enough to know what's really happening in Tennessee. But the thing I can say is one of the speculations that the Wall Street Journal mentioned was maybe you're getting an academic setting too early, and this is impacting children negatively. I think everything we've been doing in Florida is building the kind of early learning system we need, as Dawn and Heather and Jessica all talked about, focusing on the social emotional, understanding that leads to the academic success that we want. But this is not, the same kind of environment you'd find in a middle school or a high school. And so I actually think that we are doing a lot right in Florida. Could we invest a little more? Sure. Could we look at some innovations? Absolutely. But I expect Florida to continue to be a model for the rest of the nation.
Great, thank you so much. And we'll open this up for questions and answers. So if we have all the panelists, if you want to put on your cameras and feel free to ask questions to myself or Michael as well. And so the first question I see right here in the chat box is, what is the funding mix between government support and or parents paying for their children? Or do parents have to pay it all?
So Alex, I think that's probably a little different for each one of our programs and varies program to program. I know that programs that accept school readiness funding, the majority of that funding is covered between a minimal parent fee and early learning coalition funding. And then there is a differential that does not cover the cost of the child's actual care. In our case, we do not charge the parents that funding, and that is something we raise funds for, and I'm pretty sure that's the same in most of our programs at this point. Some centers are private pay centers and parents pay the majority of the funding. So that's a really great question as people are considering supporting programs, to make sure to ask so that they know the type of programs they're choosing to support.
And we have probably like a few employers on here that don't actually know how much it costs to send a child to a private center. So if any of you can kind of let them know of how much that would actually cost a parent.
So the going rate probably in Naples is probably around $225 a week. The state reimbursement for that is about $185 a week. Our families are on a sliding scale based on their income. Our average family pays $50 a week. That's equivalent of a family of 4 living at the federal poverty level. If anyone is on that under $50 for us, then they are eligible to apply for school readiness money, which would mean they wouldn't have to pay, and we would get subsidized by the government, as Heather was talking about. But as a nonprofit, our parents do not pay the full rate. They pay based on their income. But the private pays can pay $225 a week or more.
Great, thank you. And so we heard a very interesting statistic about how many births are at the NCH Birthing Center each month. There's about 330 births each month. And there's only 75 infant care spots available in Collier County. So there's a huge gap, right? So if you can kind of talk about that, of why we don't have that many infant care spots in Collier County, what does that look like for you as a center?
I could also address that because our center, when I first joined the organization 6 years ago, we only had 1 infant room for 6 weeks to 1 year old, because it's the highest costing classroom to run. You have smaller ratios by Department of Children and Families, so you can only have 4 children per teacher, and having more than 8 children in a classroom under 1 year old would probably make our turnover rate even higher if we did that. But it is the most costly. The younger the child and the lower the ratios, the more costly the classroom is, especially if you still have those quality bachelor level teachers in those classrooms. And we had consciously made the effort in the past 4 or 5 years to increase the number of infants that we're serving in the children under 3. I mentioned our wait list over 500 at one point, and 90% of it were under 3 years old, because there's less subsidies from the state and the federal government, plus it's the most costly classrooms. So when our 4th campus opens, we'll have 8 infant, a total of all our campuses, 8 infant classrooms serving 8 children each one. So it is a commitment. It was a commitment by my board that we know that we're going to increase our budget by doing that. But because that was the greatest need in the community, that's what we focused on, that 0 to 3 year old segment.
Okay, thank you. And Heather or Jessica, do you have anything to add to that?
I would echo what Dawn has stated. It is the more costly program for us to run. We have 2 centers that accept infants, and they are in our teenage parenting programs, one in Immokalee, one in Golden Gate High School. They are also the classrooms that require the most personal care routines. And that can sometimes be a concern from staff in times of pandemic, because you have to pick up that baby, right? You have to have face-to-face contact, and they need that nurturing and love. And for some of those teachers that may have underlying health issues, or family members that have underlying health issues, that can be a concern for some of those teachers.
Great. So we have another comment in the chat. She said that her daughter was on the waiting list for 3 years for a full pay spot, which is $1,000 per month at the time. And the spot didn't open up for 18 months. By that time, they found a lovely center in Bonita, and it was a very inconvenient drive for her. So I think I would just kind of want to open it up for all of you of in the wait list of how, and I know Dawn, you've had 500 students on a list. How quickly do you go through those wait lists? How often do people get those calls? Do we have a spot available?
So if a mom puts their child on, traditionally, if mom puts her child on the list when she's pregnant, that child will not get into a center until they're about 3.5 years old, because there are more in our current center, and there's more spots for the 3, 4, and 5 year olds because of the additional funding and the lower costs. So you have more seats there. With our new centers opening up, we will have more seats for under 3 year olds. So we'll be able to get those children off the wait list earlier. We've already registered our first children for our new Van Otterloo campus that hopefully, once again, opening in April. We have siblings, and one is less than 1 year old and has a seat for opening in April. But her brother is going to be 3.5 years old and was put on our wait list when his mom was pregnant with him 3.5 years ago. So he actually had to wait that 3.5 years, but his sister doesn't have to. So it is a problem. It is an issue that, because of there's less spots for that younger under 3, many kids can't get in till they're 3.5, maybe 4, or at that VPK 4-year-old level. And then sometimes those learning gaps are a little too already have been in place where it might be harder for them to become kindergarten ready in that 1 year.
Thank you. And what's your wait list look like, Heather and Jessica? Do you know how quickly the students can get through it?
We have a wait list as well. And the other issue is that our mission is to provide affordable quality childcare for low-income families. So we turn away a lot of the full pay families because we really want to serve the low-income families. We want them to have the opportunity to have a quality education. So our board is very adamant about that. So we continue to have wait lists and turn people away for that very reason.
We also have a wait list currently that would for all 3 centers, and we do have enough of a wait list. We could open additional centers if we have the staff to staff. And I completely echo what Dawn said. It is not uncommon that we'll have students that parents will put them on our wait list when they turn 1, because I don't have the private slots for infants in my 2 private centers. And we don't get them until they're 3 or 4 years of age.
And we have another question to go off of that question. It was about how are families responding when they cannot find a spot? Are they staying home, removing them from the workforce, other care options?
So Alex, I've received a lot of comments from families that they're using what I call neighborhood resources. They use someone in the neighborhood that's perhaps retired, or they utilize services from someone that's an aunt of someone or a relative. And the question there, why that may be benefiting those families while they are working, is the educational resources that might not be provided to those children throughout the day. We see a lot of children that have increased screen time, that maybe don't have the best use or the best resources for social, emotional, or cognitive development. And while I understand that this is filling the need for the parents to be able to work, it would certainly be in the better interest of the children to be enrolled in quality early educational programs where the developmental and cognitive needs can be met.
And we've had conversations with Susan Block about how can we serve the community, even if it's not a physical center. How can we go into the homes and provide resources for parents so that they know what they can do with their children, reading to their children and talking to their children. And so those are other options as well. It doesn't have to be a physical center to expand services, because some parents do choose to stay home with their children, but then that if they're not afforded those opportunities to know what to do with their children when they're home with them, when they get to kindergarten, they could be very far behind.
And we have started a program a few years ago, like Jessica's talking about, called Smart Start, where we work with moms who are at home with their children, and they meet together and they kind of have become their own cohort, but we give them the resources and skills to work with their children at home as they're learning and the child's learning. So especially in the lower income families, they need the resources. They don't have the books and the letters to play with and the manipulative. So it's important that we be able to provide that in the home also.
And I think as you're talking about all of that, I would just give a shout out to each of you who are working in the early learning field, and to all of your educators, because so often we focus on the fact that this is work that is not very high paid because of the business model and the funding structures. But this is, as you've just pointed out, extremely high skill. And the work that you're doing every day, I mean, there's always the joke that who, a parent has a birthday party for 2-year-olds, and after 2 hours, they can't take it anymore. And yet, educators are working with this day in and day out. And what you've talked about with the social emotional, the ability to work with all these big feelings and channel that into productive relationship building and self-control, and all of these skills that when you think about it are the ones that the workforce wants. We care about the social emotional skills, we care about emotional intelligence, and all of those things are developed early on. And it is these extremely high skilled teachers who know how to bring out the best in our young children.
Thank you, Madeline. I echo that. We have a question about from AJ. Can you please share digital technology use initiatives in early childhood education? Who wants to take that question?
I will, Alex. So we initially, at the beginning of the pandemic, our centers have been open except for 2 weeks, the majority of the pandemic. And we did try a virtual program for our parents, and we did not receive a great response from it. I think because our parents need the children to be in care when they are working, so they don't have the opportunity to be participating and helping at home keep the children engaged for the virtual programming. I will say we have added virtual programming to our curriculum resources that parents can do in addition to their program day. I often get questions from parents, or the directors get questions from parents about wanting homework for 4-year-olds, which we wouldn't really consider their version of homework developmentally appropriate, but the homework of pointing out shapes when you're in a grocery store, or asking why you think the tower fell over when they built their block so high. Those are the type of homework questions that we really try and educate parents that they can take everyday learning activities, engage those upper high level questions to build those brain connections that we're looking for in the early education environment.
We also work with our VPK students so that to be kindergarten ready, that they know how to use a computer, because when they get into kindergarten, they'll be taking their assessment tests on computers. And most of our children don't have home computers. They can figure out the tablets and the screens and stuff, but using a mouse and a keyboard and everything that. So we have worked in the technology and having a computer in the classroom so that they can learn that way and make sure they're ready for kindergarten to take any assessment tests and work on computers when they get into the public schools.
Thank you. So I really appreciate all of your time, panelists, and all the attendees for listening to this important conversation, discussion. So at this time, I will pass it back to all the panelists. Is there one last thing that you want to leave with all the attendees, and make sure that hopefully they can share it out into the community, or to bring it back to their executives and push this topic forward?
I would just say that there's a lot of great nonprofits in Collier County, but the nonprofits you see in front of you truly are shaping the future of the workforce and the community in Collier County. And we need your support now more than ever. These are very challenging times in early learning.
I just want to thank the Greater Naples Chamber and Future Ready Collier Champions for Learning for supporting us and really trying to bring awareness to this issue. I think that that's tremendous, and it's conversations like these that will help move our community forward. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to thank everyone because you're on this call because the topic either speaks to you or you have an interest in it, and really do appreciate your concern for the early learning career paths and organizations. And so, yes, continue it. We need to get to that next level, and that next level is having that workforce that could continue the great work that's been going on. And we appreciate your support and continuing this conversation. And thank you to the Chamber for leading it. And for Future Ready Collier, you rock.
Yes, I would say too, thank you to the Chamber, thank you to Future Ready Collier, And I would just say we should all be bosses for babies. Any employers on the line, please check it out and get involved. Happy to have a conversation if you don't know where to get started. But there's so much energy in the community that you can be part of. So thank you.
Thank you all. All right, so what's next? So I will put a form in our chat box. Please copy that, fill it out whenever you can. And I'll also send a follow-up email tomorrow with this presentation recording and a few other resources for you. But this form, this is to continue the conversation and to learn more. We want to collect your information, make sure that you are up to date, more educated on early learning and what's happening, the challenges and so forth. So there's a form there for you to sign out fill out. I will also share my screen if I can do that. And I will pass this back over to Michael.
Well, thanks, Alex. You did a great job today moderating all of this. And thanks to everybody who's taken part in this today. You know, Madeline, thank you. It's an honor to be associated with Bosses for Babies. Dawn and Heather and Jessica, you guys were great. So many questions, and you guys were able to cover it all. And you demonstrated how this is such an important profession, and you guys are professionals and shaping the future of our community every day and helping our employees to have the capability to go to work from so many of them. I think it's just important that we're going to continue on with this conversation and this part of our mission. We know it's important, and hopefully we'll get more and more awareness among our employers and more buy-in on giving them ideas of things that they can do to help support early learning in our community. So thank you all, every single one of you. Just a few things before we wrap up. We're going to show some dates here on some upcoming things we have on our agenda. So more Wake Up Naples and Business After 5, Youth Business Fair, great event that's coming up in March. And so any of those kind of things, please get them on your calendar. Our annual meeting in May, just all these things we're trying to do to make sure our goal is not just get people together, but give them information, important information they need to know the things that are impacting our economy and impacting our employers and employees. So please, we'll keep you informed on all those events. I want to again thank our series sponsors, all these companies, for helping us out to be able to put this on. And we also want to give a big special thank you to Champions for Learning. Thank you, Susan, and your team and everybody that helps through Champions for Learning and Future Ready Collier. It's the great work that's so important for our future of our economy, future of our community. Thanks for all that you do. Finally, just remember that every day what we are trying to do is cultivate this economic opportunity for all, and that's everyone. And we want to make sure that they have those chances to succeed and to have capability to take care of themselves, their families, loved ones, and being able to find great employment and great jobs and create great businesses and organizations here in Collier County. So please remember the Chamber, ask us questions, support. We thank you all that you do to support us, and we will stay in touch with everybody. So have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.